What if I told you that a huge part of your life story, your personality, your intelligence, even your politics, was kind of written before you were even born? Today, we're going to get into the genetic blueprint that helps make you, well, you. Let's get right into it.
Okay, you've heard this one a million times, right? Nature versus nurture. It's like the classic debate. Is it your upbringing that makes you who you are, or was it all coded into your DNA right from day one?
And for decades, this was the big debate in psychology. You had scientists on both sides fiercely arguing. But here's the thing. For the researchers who are actually doing the work, that whole debate, it's pretty much over.
Yeah, you heard that right. Just listen to what researcher Michael Rudder said. The evidence is just inescapable. Genes play a huge role in shaping us. So the conversation today isn't if genes matter anymore. The real question is how they matter.
And honestly, this is where the science gets really fascinating. Scientists like Thomas Bouchard, whose work we're digging into today, are asking way more specific questions now. Like, okay, how much influence do they have? And how do genes actually work? How do they shape our minds and the choices we make?
All right, so to even start answering those questions, we've got to wrap our heads around one really important idea. And that brings us to Section 1, decoding heritability.
Okay, that key concept is heritability. And look, getting this one right is absolutely crucial. Heritability does not mean that, say, 50% of your personality is from your genes. No, it's a statistic about a whole population. It tells us how much of the differences, the variation we see between people, is because of their different genes.
So a good way to think about it is like this chart here. Imagine all the reasons people differ in a trait, let's say how outgoing they are, is one big pie. Well, heritability, which scientists call H², is the slice of that pie that can be explained by genetics. The rest of the pie, that's all the environmental stuff, plus a little sliver for, the fact that we can't measure things perfectly. Let's just really lock this in, because this is the #1 mistake people make. Heritability is about why people in a group are different from each other. It is not, I repeat, not some kind of genetic fortune cookie that tells you your life is all planned out. It's a tool for understanding groups, not your personal destiny. Big difference.
Okay, so now that we've got that straight, let's get to the fun part. Let's look at the actual evidence from all those studies on twins and adoptees. And trust me, some of these results are pretty surprising.
So check this out. When you look at the big 5 personality traits, things like how extroverted or conscientious you are, the heritability is incredibly consistent. It's almost always somewhere between 40 and 60%. What that means is a pretty big chunk of the reason you might be more open to new things than your friend, well, it comes down to your genes.
But then we get to IQ, and the pattern does something completely wild. It flips. When we're little kids, the environment is a massive factor. But look what happens as we get older. The genetic influence just skyrockets. It can get as high as almost 90%. So why? Well, the thinking is that as we grow up, we start picking our own environments, our friends, our jobs, our hobbies, and we tend to pick things that match our natural genetic tendencies. We're basically amplifying our own genetic signal over time.
And this strong genetic thread doesn't just apply to personality or IQ. It's a huge factor in mental health, too. For an illness like schizophrenia, the heritability is incredibly high. We're talking around 80%. For other things, like major depression or different phobias, that genetic link is a bit more moderate, but it is absolutely, clearly part of the picture.
All right, now let's get into a finding that honestly surprised even the scientists who were doing this research. It's about a trait they assumed had to be 100% about your environment. So think about something like your social attitudes, say political conservatism. That's got to be something you pick up from your parents, your school, your friends, right? It's all nurture. And you know what? The data shows that when we're young, you're totally right. Before age 20, the heritability for that is basically zero, zilch. It seems like it's all about the environment you grow up in. But, and this is a big but, the story does not end there.
Because something really remarkable happens when we get older, when we leave home and start creating our own lives. A genetic influence that was basically sleeping, it wakes up, and it starts to play a significant role in shaping how we see the world.
Just look at this leap.
In adults, the heritability of conservatism jumps up to around 65% for men and 45% for women. This is a perfect, real-world example of what we were just talking about with IQ. It seems this genetic tendency comes out later in life, when we're free to choose the people and experiences that fit with who we naturally are.
Okay, so what's the big takeaway here? Why does all this matter for the science of, us?
Well, the psychologist Paul Meehl, he put it very bluntly. He basically argued that any theory in psychology or social science that just ignores genetics is, well, it's built on sand. If you try to explain something complex and you pretend genes have zero influence, your theory is going to be, in his pretty harsh words, scientifically unimpressive and technologically worthless.
So here's the bottom line from decades of research. The big, profound takeaway. Genetic influence isn't just for things like your eye color. When it comes to our psychological traits, our personality, our vulnerabilities, even our attitudes, a genetic component isn't the rare exception. It's the rule.
But here's the cool part. Accepting this fact doesn't end the conversation. Not at all. In fact, it just opens up a whole new frontier of much deeper, much more interesting questions.
And believe me, there are some huge mysteries left to solve. Like, why are most traits only moderately heritable? Why not all or nothing? How do different genes team up in these super complex ways? And what's actually happening down at the molecular level when our genes and our environment talk to each other? I mean, these are the massive puzzles for the next wave of scientists to figure out.
Which brings us back to where we started, but with a new twist. If our genes, our nature, actually influence the life experiences, the nurture that we seek out for ourselves, what does that mean for that old debate? Maybe nature versus nurture was never the right question. Maybe it's always been a story of nature through nurture.